Hello, friend. John Dalton here, Further Emergence podcast, where we go into love, consciousness, and the mystery. And in this week's episode, we're going into following your deepest passion. And we've got a question about surrender and depression. So let's have a normally we go through a quick review of the memes on the Further Emergence Instagram feed. There's only one this week. I didn't do anything on social media this week. I've been putting together the dealing with the psychic world training, and I just found that just took a lot. It took a lot of my focus and resources, and I just didn't have any bandwidth for doing social media. So only one meme this week, but it's a good one. It's from our old friend Rumi, and it says, "Let yourself be silently drawn by the strange pull of what you really love. It will not lead you astray." Which is beautiful. As an aside, when I see the word astray written, it's very hard not to see the word ashtray. I keep putting a H in there. And that doesn't even make sense. It will not lead you ashtray. What does that even mean? It doesn't mean anything. All right, so this is a beautiful... there's something about memes, really, isn't there? They can just, for me anyway, if it's a good meme, if it's not just clever or just smart or politically correct or the right thing to say, but if it just hits the nail on the head, it can really sum up the whole of life in one little image or one little bit of text, And this one does it for me anyway. Let yourself be silently drawn by the strange pull of what you really love. It will not lead you astray. You could write that on my gravestone, Here lies John. He let himself be drawn by the strange pull of what he really loved, and it didn't lead him astray. And, that's not to say, my life has been easy. It hasn't been easy, but I don't think it's hard. I don't think it's been harder than anybody else's, one of the things that comes up in the spiritual life is to kind of look at other people and go, why can't I just have a simple, ordinary life? Why can't I have a life like other people? And I've been lucky enough to not have that feeling much, but just from working with lots of people, it comes up. It's like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I just have an ordinary life? And it comes down to this, I think. It comes down to this thing of there's something deep, very deep, drawing you. And you can either surrender to that, which we'll be talking about later, or you can get dragged. But either way, it's happening. Luckily, I don't have a huge amount of resistance. I have a lot of resistance, but I don't really have that much of going, why can't I just have a simple, ordinary life, Because to me, a simple, ordinary life, you take the lid off any family, any person, they've got something going on, And maybe I'm in the lucky, happy position, I don't know. I'm in the position where I get to see it, because I work with lots of people all around the world, so it's not just a cultural thing. And they, if you saw them in the street, you'd kind of think, well, everything's gone great for them. They look like they are one of the happy people. And then you get talking to them, and they've got stuff going on. They've got everybody's got something going on, and if you're ever out and about and you sort of see people who, at another time you might go, oh, why can't I have a life like them? You see people like that. And then, something happens, one of the kids drops a bottle of ketchup in the supermarket or breaks something. And you just get a little window into the life, and you can see the stress, and maybe one of the parents just, snaps at the child or something like that. Or, you're just walking around and everything looks lovely, and then something happens and you just kind of get a little window into what's going on for people. That's what that kind of thing makes it easy for me. It's kind of like, well, that they're paying a price for that kind of life, and I'm paying a price for this kind of life. And I'm not saying my price is better or or anything like that. I'm just saying I prefer to pay my price, But there's a price to be paid one way or the other. And I don't mean that in a, like there's no escape, but there's consequences to everything. And, that seems to be just one of the rules of the illusion that we're in. There are consequences. And it's like, which consequences do you want, So if you've got that strange pull inside you, it can be disturbing. I understand that, because it doesn't make sense and it doesn't fit, and it's kind of doesn't even feel like you. There can be a feeling of like, well, what about me? I have some dreams. I have some things I'd like to do. But this strange pull just pulls you. But the lovely thing is that he includes what you really love, because it's the strange pull of what you really love. And it's if you kind of face that and accept it and go, yeah, this is what I really love. This is this strange pull of this deep thing. It's what I really love. And you follow it. Or you just let it do its thing, really. You just get out of the way. And that's been my experience. I just get out of the way as much as I can, or just try and listen for it. Where is it going, and how can I smooth the way, Because I want to bring all parts of me. I don't want to be dragged. I want to go willingly, I want to be part of it, To me, it always reminds me of surfing, even though I've never done surfing, even though I lived in Australia for 10 years. I never learned how to surf. I was never interested in surfing. But it seems like the idea of you can either be in the waves and get smashed by them, or you can be on top of them, surfing them. Either way, you're in the waves, So for me, I'm kind of listening, waiting, trying to be with it as much as I can. And over time, I've seen that it doesn't lead me astray. If it's very new for you, you don't know that bit. You don't know if it's going to lead you astray. So you just kind of have to take Rumi's word for it. And you don't have to take my word for it, but you can hear me say, my sense is it doesn't lead you astray, or my experience is it hasn't led me astray. But it's a beautiful sentiment. Let yourself be silently drawn by the strange pull of what you really love. It will not lead you astray, or ashtray. Farm news, yep. Heck of a lot of activity around the place this week. You might, if you're a regular listener, you'll know that I mentioned that there was a leak in the roof, a very slight leak in the roof. I didn't go on about the second leak, but we had a bit of a plaster issue here, and I've been getting onto the owner. I've not been getting onto the owner. I just told the owner about it, and we have been trying to get it organised since I moved in, which is over a year and a half ago. We nearly got it organised last summer, but it didn't happen. So I went through another winter of seepage and drippages and whatnot. It wasn't super bad, but it wasn't good for the house. Anyway, they showed up. I got a text literally the day before going, oh, the plasters are coming tomorrow. They're going to do it, And, I see people here at the house. Okay, it's on Zoom, but still, I relish the peace and quiet that it affords me. Anyway, I wasn't going to stop the builders from coming, the plasterers from coming. So yeah, they were here, 3 of them, and they were like a SWAT team. They just were up on the chimney where one of the leaks was, with this health and safety nowhere to be seen. Like when I was a carpenter, which would have been back in the late 80s. No, actually, it wasn't. It was the early, it was the early 80s. God. Yeah, early 80s. Health and safety wasn't a big thing, because I see the young tradesmen now and they're all with their harnesses and all this kind of stuff. Well, these guys were old school. How they got up to the chimney was they had a digger, with a big long extension arm, and they climbed into the bucket. The bucket had handles welded onto it. Wasn't a harness in sight, and up they were doing what they needed to do, and they had to get above the conservatory, and they did the same thing, you know. So this is the diggers outside the fence, outside the house, and the two lads are in the bucket, and it's, you know, very long extension on the bucket, and brought them right up, and they put a cap on top of the chimney, which, you know, they basically were pouring concrete up there. But no, I didn't. Some part of me just really enjoys that, you know. I mean, I get the health and safety thing, and I know terrible accidents have happened, but it's just something, something, it sort of speaks to the wildness or the bravado of like, well, we're just going to do it, you know. So anyway, yeah, it was 2 days of chaos, mess, dust, plaster and dust, you know, because they had to plaster inside the house as well as outside. So yeah, it was like a whirlwind for 2 days, and then it was all done. And I was just left cleaning up cleaning up the mess that I didn't even know was coming. Well, like, that's what I'm saying. I got the text the day before. It wasn't like I could plan for it and kind of get things out of the way. I was kind of running around trying to see people and clear the decks. But it's all good now. So, and the other thing that's been happening here is we've been having like unbelievably sunny weather. It's like about as classic an Irish summer as you could hope for. It's beautiful. So the sun, you know, like, we're not going to get to check how if it all worked until we get some serious rain in the winter. But they did all sorts of sealing, so I'm sure it'll be fine. These podcasts are on YouTube if you're listening. If you're a YouTube sort of person, they are there if you want to go and watch them. I also have a blog that I write regularly every week, and I have friendly notes that I send out every Sunday. So if you want to get a friendly note from me every Sunday, go to furtheremergence.com, scroll around for a bit, and then a little pop-up will appear asking you if you want to stay in touch, and you can sign up there. This week's life hack. Life hack. I can't think of a better name for it. Is shampoo. Yeah, shampoo. I discovered shampoo is a racket. People often ask me about my hair. You know, what do you do? What do you do to coiffure your hair? I don't do anything. But I used to use shampoo. And then I think it's about 2 or 3 years ago, I I just had a feeling there was something up with shampoo. So I researched it, and it's unnecessary, and I don't use it. Now I do other things, meaning I brush my hair, and you know, I have longish hair, so I brush my hair 100 times. I'm like a princess, 100 times every night and 100 times every morning, and that's to move the oils off your scalp down the length of your hair. So that's important. But the whole, like, when you use shampoo, it actually strips the oils off your hair. It makes you have to use it again and again and again. It's like a perpetual thing. So, I don't use shampoo. My head was it took me about 3 weeks to get used to it. So a bit itchy, a bit weird, but that's like just like what I'm discovering about my body is that it's very adaptive. And it, you know, like, if you don't rush it and you slowly introduce things to it, it will find its equilibrium and adapt to whatever you are doing. So whether that's cold water immersion, food reduction, or no shampoo, it will, you know, adapt. So yeah, no shampoo. I do wash my hair though, but just with water, and I sort of scrub a dub like as if I was using shampoo. But that's just to kind of move things around and give it a rinse. And then I do the brushing. The brushing is crucial. First thing in the morning, first thing and last thing at night, 100 times with a brush. And another little tip, get a brush. If you have longish hair, get a brush. And I think this is the sort of thing women just know, but you know, I didn't know these things. Get a brush that's made of don't use a brush that has plastic bristles. Is that the word? You know, the sticky, pointy little porcupine things. You've got to get one that's bamboo. and then the hairs don't get, you're not pulling your hair out as you're brushing your hair. The plastic tends to snag your hair a little bit, and it'll pull it out, whereas the bamboo, it just kind of goes around it and doesn't. It's gentler, much more gentle on your hair. And I got one. This is all came from my research when I sort of got, hang on a minute, what's going on with shampoo? So there's my life hack. Let me tell you about some of the trainings I've got on the growing roster of trainings. So I've got the big. If you're a craniosacral therapist or you're interested in craniosacral therapy, I've got the big masterclass, 7 or 8 hours of video there. Masterclass I did in Cape Town years ago, and I recorded the whole thing. It's very good if you're a craniosacral therapist. Not if you're interested in craniosacral therapy, no, wouldn't recommend it. But if you're a craniosacral therapist and you want to, it was a postgrad, so it was for people who are qualified and sort of helping them go deeper, I suppose. So there's that. Then there's the what's kind of forming up to be a deepening series of trainings, and it starts with the meditation for growth and consciousness training. So there's that. These are all audio trainings, and then the next one, the one I'm in the middle of, is dealing with the psychic world, and it kind of charts the progression of consciousness, your growth in consciousness. So they're all fantastic. When I announced them, when I first started the craniosacral one is, as I say, years ago. But when I kind of went, I'm going to do a training, it's going to be on meditation. I didn't even know what I was going to do, because I've been doing all this stuff for so long, and just in the writing of it and in putting it together, I've discovered how much I know about these topics when I go to actually share that knowledge. So yeah, I highly recommend them. They're very good. Okay, so I have a question that came in on the Discord, the Further Emergence Discord. Could you expand your thoughts about surrender? What does it feel like? Do you practice surrender intentionally, and when in your observation, and how does it happen? So surrender is a big topic, because there's different types of surrender. So let's start off with the big surrender. The big surrender is just the surrender I was talking about earlier on with Rumi. Is the surrender to what is the process that you're in. And that starts with recognizing that you're in that process. So if you don't recognize that you're in that process, then life is just sort of happening to you with both barrels. And it can be lovely, meaning, you probably know people that seem to have a very drama-free life. And then you have other people who've got a very drama-free life. And to both of those people, life is happening at speed. If you're drawn to this thing that I was talking about, then it begins to make sense to you. You get a sense of that there's something, these events are not random. These things that are not random, there's a resonance with what's happening externally to what's going on inside me. I am drawn. I find myself reading books or listening to people like me, or interested in this sort of stuff, and you start to dawn on you that it's not isolated. They're not separate. You're interested in this stuff and what's going on. There's a link, and you get to a point where you kind of go, this is really important to me. In fact, this is the most important thing in my life. And you can resist that, because you might have a sense of, well, I've got to leave my job, I've got to leave my marriage, I've got to leave my country, I've got to, that might be where you're, the silent thing that's drawing you. Not saying you have to do any of those things, and if you don't feel those things, then that's fine as well. But this is a wild ride, this whole spiritual thing, and you never know which way it's going to go. So if you come to a point where you stop resisting it, and you just go, yeah, this is what's happening, I'm going to surrender to it, because it's the deeper thing of, I find this stuff hard to describe, but like what people call God and, the universe and all that, I don't really, that's not how I experience it. But how I experience it is there's a big thing that I love. I can't really name it. I can't really describe it, but I know it. Like people say, do you believe in God? I go, no, I know God. Again, I don't like to use that word, but because it's so loaded. But the idea of belief, it's like, well, you only have to believe in something that you don't know, you can't experience. Like I experience it, so I don't need to believe it. So I know it, I love it, and I'm surrendered to it. And I also know it loves me back. Don't know how I know that, but I do. So that's one part of surrender. The other part of it is, it's like the flip side of it. Really, what is surrendering? And what's surrendering, or my experience of what is surrendering, is my mind. My mind, or my limited perspective, is accepting the fact that it doesn't have the answers. Now, they might seem like the same thing, but they're not. Because the surrendering to life or God or whatever you want to call it comes from quite deep, and it's a knowledge for me. It's not like a thought form, But there's another separate process where my mind gives up. And meaning, if you put a little stethoscope on my head, you'd hear my mind, and it's gone on with all the same stuff your mind has gone on with. I think I'm really important. I've got my stuff going. I don't mean that in an egotistical way, but I think, I think my things are important. I think that what's going on in my life is important, and what am I going to do about that thing, and why did that person say that to me? All that kind of stuff that, goes on. That goes on in my mind as well. But it's almost, as well as that, my mind also knows that it hasn't a clue. It hasn't a clue about what's going on, the deeper reasons why things are the way they are. And it will fuss about with the logistics of my life, and that could be like, even the logistics of my heart, and my feelings. But the deeper stuff, it doesn't. It used to kind of go, have all these concepts and ideas, and when I was in the stage of like absorbing, and I was reading a lot, and I was thinking about all this kind of spiritual stuff, and my mind thought it could think it through. It could think itself into being enlightened. And it couldn't. It just couldn't. And I'm not saying that, that being enlightened was part of, that surrender and being enlightened go hand in hand. They don't. They didn't. But there's my mind knows that it's just fussing around about things. It also is very conscious of the fact that it doesn't know where it goes every night in deep dreamless sleep, and it doesn't even think about it too much anymore. It's just surrendered. It's surrendered to the mystery, really, because it kind of knows about the mystery as an idea. It's never really experienced the mystery, but it knows about it as an idea, and it surrenders to it. Because it's a little bit like meditation. My mind doesn't like meditation, and that hasn't changed. And I've been meditating for 30 years. My mind still will try and, come up with ways or reasons why I shouldn't, And it finds it uncomfortable, because it's, when I meditate, I'm consciously turning it off. And it likes to, when I'm awake, it likes to exist. And it gets a bit panicky when I'm consciously turning it off. but it has seen the benefits of meditation. It doesn't really understand them, but it has seen this amazing mystery, this deep, profound mystery that I go into, come closer to the surface of my life, and things that my mind would, like, how am I going to deal with this? How am I going to get through this? How am I going to, what's going to happen? My mind has seen how the mystery just comes up in a way that it can't understand and can't put words on, but comes up and supports. It's part of what I think Rumi was saying about not being led astray. It's seen that happen so often now that even though it still tries it on about meditation, it's also surrendered. It has surrendered to this deeper process. So there's this deep surrender that comes up. There's the surrender of your mind, and then there's the surrender to a spiritual master, I suppose. Now, I'm not saying you have to do this, but I did it. And it's tricky waters to be in, okay? Because let me tell you about the process I went through first, and then I'll explain why it's tricky. So my spiritual teacher or master was Barry Long. And, I got quite close to Barry, meaning, like the way he had his setup structured was you could go to meetings. He didn't do one-to-one things like I do or anything like that. He wasn't a therapist or he didn't have that kind of thing at all. He taught meditation, and then it just grew and grew and grew. But he didn't, you couldn't have a conversation with them, You had meetings and they were big, hundreds of people, meetings, and you were in the audience and you could put your hand up and you could ask him a question on stage. He would be on stage and you would be down in the congregation. He didn't call it a congregation, okay, in the audience. And he would answer you. That was as much as you got. I got closer because I was, I have a film and TV background, so I was able to, I offered to help with the videoing, and because of that, I got to be around him a bit more. And it's not like I had conversations with him. And, he wasn't an easy person. He never turned off. Like if I remember sitting in a room with him, we were looking at an edit of something, and he was talking to me as if, with exactly the same way as if he was up on stage and I was down in the audience. He never turned that off, as far as I could see. So it was easy for me to kind of build up a kind of this guy, and I'm not so sure, and I'm not disagree with that thing he said, and I'm not so sure about this other thing, and like you would with anybody. It's not good to just take anything on face value, And Barry used to say, like, don't believe anything I say, you just test it in your experience. And it's everybody should say that, I think. Like anybody who's conveying this kind of stuff is like, because the root of it is, I don't know what the truth is, I just know this is what my experience is, Anyone who sort of starts telling you this is the truth, I would, leave. So there came a point when I recognized that I was resisting what was coming through Barry. I sort of separated the person and his personality and his unconsciousness from what was coming through. And it was almost like the mystery was coming through this person very strongly. I mean, it comes through everybody, but it was coming through this person very strongly. And, I've had the experience, I'm sure like you did, I talked about this in my book, Maya Noise. Like when I first time I knew God, I was looking up at the stars, and I was like 17 or 18. I just was looking up at the stars, and I just knew God existed, or God was a thing and God was real, And I've been in beautiful places, sunsets, beaches, and you can feel the connection and the deep, beautiful gratitude and all these wonderful feelings. But it's very broad, and it's very impersonal. It's quite different to when you're talking to somebody and you can feel all that huge, broad, expansive beauty and power and, love and goodness and just all the, profundity coming through this very little gate, this person. And for me, there was a point when I surrendered to that. Okay. Now, here's where it gets tricky. It's very important not to surrender to the person. It's a process of surrendering to what's coming through the person, but not to the person. Because when you surrender to the person, it's ridiculous because the person's just a human being with all their, stuff, like Barry was just a human being with all his stuff, So it would be crazy to surrender to Barry Long, okay? But what I did surrender to, and I think it's important, was I surrendered to what's coming through him, And I never said a word to him about this, okay? It's not like I got down on my knees in front of, oh, Barry, I surrender to you, But I did do that internally. And it was very important, because it's important. It was important for me to recognize it. It's all the same, really. These three different things that I've been talking about. The surrendering to the God or whatever the big thing. There's my mind kind of going, I don't know, I give up. This stuff, I don't know. Same thing. It's that surrender. And then it's like when you see it coming through this person, and you know it. You just know what's happening. That you don't let yourself become confused with the package of the person, their stuff, and kind of go, oh, he's full of shit, no, whatever, that you actually go, no, I see this and I surrender to it, So internally, I did get down on my knees and I bowed down internally to what was coming through Barry, and it's what comes through all the other enlightened people around and everybody, because once you see it, you can see it in everybody, and you can see that it's, sometimes you can see it very clearly, and sometimes the weather patterns of their own consciousness come over and obscure it. But once you see it, you can't unsee it, and I think it's important to surrender to that as well. So those are my thoughts on surrender. So I had another question, and this person says, I'd love to hear your opinion on depression. What is its source if you've had it all your life? So I have had quite a bit of experience with depression, not myself, but in working with it and helping people with it. And depression, like most things that have a label, you can have it's a small word for a big thing, and that's why, say, conditions like what used to be just called, that child is autistic. Now it's like the autistic spectrum disorder, because they kind of go, well, there's a lot under that tent, and you could say the same about most things, but with depression, it's the same, So there's different types of depression, and but just because this person is saying if you've had it all your life, my gut feeling, my instinctive feeling would be that it probably goes back to birth trauma. Okay, birth trauma accounts for a lot of things. Okay, and people can carry it their whole lives and not even know they had it, and they can have all these other symptoms and think, oh, I'm just a this kind of person, I'm just a that kind of person. And I'm not even talking about you were traumatized by your birth. I'm talking about physical trauma. The birth process can, for some people, be just traumatic, meaning it can, if you have a normal, even if you have a cesarean, if you're born by cesarean section or something like that, but just like if you're a normal natural birth, your body is designed to uh, collapse. Certainly your head is designed to collapse as you come through the birth canal. I can remember when my daughter was being born, I was there for the birth, and as her head crowned and began to emerge, I was like, oh my God, we're having a cone head, because it doesn't come out round, it came out pointy. But it's designed to do that. It's designed to collapse a little bit, and then pop back out. That's why all the fontanelles are still open. The fontanelles are the spaces in your head between the bones. It's like a baby's head, the top of their. Well, that's the fontanelle, but it's not just there. There's ones around the back as well, and there's slight give in most of the sutures. Because they're not fully interdigitated yet. They're not fully ossified. They never actually ossify, meaning they never go solid. They still move a bit, but anyway. So your head is designed to collapse as you come through. So there's an incredible kind of compressive forces put on your body. And those compressive forces are part of the birth process, and they start a lot of other processes in your body. So it's not like it's an unnatural thing. It's all designed. It's a beautiful, wonderful thing, right? But there can be intervention in those times. So, like forceps, for example, I remember treating a woman in her 80s, okay, and she released birth trauma, and she had a mark on her chest, just not. Like you could see it. You could see she had a mark on her chest. And I said, what's that from? And she said, oh, that's from the forceps. Okay. That's how badly the forceps was applied, because the forceps is supposed to be up on your head. It's not supposed to be down on your chest, and it's certainly not supposed to leave a mark on you. And I've heard, mothers tell me about being pulled down the bed, like the delivery bed, 4 and 5 times as they were trying to get the baby out. And it's already a difficult, pressurized kind of situation. So to have like a forceps is like a pliers that they put in one part at a time. So they'll put one side in, then they'll put the other side in, and then they kind of connect them together, and they'll, they have a handle on the baby, and they'll be like pulling it, So these kind of things can put patterns of trauma in a person's head. Even without the big drama of forceps, though, there can be a in the birth process, if the mother's head is not, if the mother's cervix isn't fully dilated, or if there's a little point when the baby gets a little bit stuck, okay, and the pressure builds up and the panic comes into the baby, it can put patterns of trauma in the baby's head as well. And instead of it just naturally popping back out, it can be a little bit restricted. Okay, and with restrictions, particularly in your head, a small restriction in the wrong place can have a big effect. Okay, a big restriction in the place that it doesn't matter so much doesn't have any effect at all. I remember seeing a girl in Brisbane many years ago. She was like 5, and her head was deformed. Like her head was cranioplagiocephaly, I think it's called. Like out one side of her forehead was huge, completely misshapen, and she didn't have any symptoms at all, other than I've got this thing in my head. I've got this strange shape to my head, okay? And then I've had other people, and they look like they're beautiful, symmetrical, perfect heads, and they've got all sorts of problems. So a depression, one of the things that can come from a restriction is depression, because there's a bone in your head that runs between your temples. It's called your sphenoid. And if it is compressed backwards, it just seems to cause depression. And I've had like hundreds of people. Is it hundreds? Am I exaggerating? I think I'm not. I think it would be hundreds, of people who I have, if that's the cause, it's not a case of like, oh, I'm just going to lift up their sphenoid. But if I get a sense of that's what's going on, and I can help that original birth trauma to release, it's like the clouds part, and they're suddenly like, wow, you know. Like, to give you an example of how, like, the difficult thing about depression is it sort of feels like it's a psychological problem. And in some cases it is, but if the root cause of it is to do with a restriction, then it can seem like miraculous, you know. Like, I remember seeing a woman again in Australia many years ago, and she had postnatal depression, another type of depression under the big tent of depression. She had postnatal depression, and she'd had it for, I think it was 11 years when she came to see me. So just think about that for a minute. 11 years. That means for the 11 years of her child's life, she was depressed. Okay, and she had seen everybody, you know. That's the thing about people who come and see me. Like, I remember one of the people that I used to, I was training, when I used to train people to be craniosacral therapists. She said to me one day, you know, we're in the resort business. I was like, what? She said, yeah, we're the last resort. You know, we're people have tried everything else, and then they'll come to us, you know, and that is true. So this woman had seen everybody, and she'd gone down the psychological route. She was on medication, whatever. And the problem for her was that when she was giving birth to her daughter, the anesthetist who was doing the epidural, they were either not sure what they were doing, or they had a couple of goes at it, let's just say that. And they put a pattern of restriction in her dural tube. Now, her dural tube is the tube of membrane that goes around her spinal cord, and then it goes up into, lines the inside of your head. So we've kind of got this tadpole-shaped membrane in our bodies, okay? And if it's really tough, this stuff, okay? And if it gets restricted, it affects the whole thing. So there was this restriction in her lower spine, right? That's where they did the epidural, lower spine, and it was pulling down the dural tube, which was pulling her head in, and it was where it showed up, where the weakness showed up, was in her sphenoid, and so she got depression. So within, like, I think it was 8 weeks, less than 8 weeks, got that pattern to release in her lower back, you know, and she was kind of going, it's my head, you know, I'm depressed, why are you focusing on my lower back? And I was like, you know, it's going to be fine. So that released, and then was able to help that kind of have the knock-on effect up through the rest of her spine, up into her head. And yeah, miraculous, oh my God, you know, it's gone. The depression is gone. It's just gone. How did you do that? You know, I was like, well, I explained it to her again. I mean, I explained it to her on day one, but, you know, it's like, yeah, that sounds great. But then when it actually happened, it's like, wow, that's amazing. Because the way, the weird kind of way that the membrane system in our body, because the membrane system flows into the fascia, so it's all connected, you know, it's like all this, you know, like I remember, if you think of a tablecloth, cups and saucers and knives and forks, whatever, and let's say it's a big table, let's say it's one of those like in a ballroom kind of things, you know, it's a big long table. And let's say you take one corner of the tablecloth and you just start to pull it ever so gently. It starts to affect everything. All the plates start to move, you know, as you keep tugging on it very slowly, the plates, and they'll eventually start crashing into each other, you know. So you might be, you know, pulling the tablecloth at one end, and up at the other end, there's two saucers that are banging together. Now, those saucers could be, you know, two bones that are on either side of a nerve, and they're banging together, and you're getting, you know, whatever, migraines or depression or whatever. So when the person asked me the question, what's the source of it if you've had it all your life, it could be that. It could be some kind of birth trauma, you know. So it depends on what the root cause of the depression is, you know. And like that's like in my one-to-one work, that's the real focus of what I'm doing, is to try and see what the root cause is, because it's really unsatisfying for me. It's purely selfish on my part, to work with somebody and to just be fiddling around on the surface and not really helping them. Just band-aid kind of stuff, I'm much more interested in getting to the root of things. And over time, that's why I've ended up doing it in terms of remote work, because when I work with people, I meet them in the mystery, the deepest place there is, kind of thing. And then I listen very carefully to what their system is communicating to me, where it's getting stuck, if it's getting stuck, and what it needs some help with. It's never a case of I'm kind of like, well, I know what to do here, I never know what to do. But I have lots of skills when something's communicated, So that's a little window into what depression can be about. All right, that's all I've got for you this week. I trust you're well. I trust you're of good cheer. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.